And so I hope you're sort of getting the concept of how complex this issue is, and the fact that we have to take the bull by the horns, and that strip till is one of the ways that we think, not great research yet, but we think we can start to address this. So up next, our next speaker is Ken Nixon. Ken farms with his brother Kevin and his dad George near Ilderton. I've worked with Ken for a lot of years. They parked the plow in 1992. They went straight no-till. That wasn't just working perfectly for them. And they got into strip tillage. Ken is one of the foremost innovators on strip tillage and has lots of experience. So Ken, if you could come and tell us exactly what you're doing and why you made those choices, we'll learn.
Good morning. How's the sound? Good, thank you. So I understood we were going to be outside today or in a tent, and the visual aids weren't going to be maybe the greatest, so I don't have any slides. I'm going to tell you about why we started, why we still do it, benefits realized, and then I'm going to kind of do a Letterman top 10. If you got a piece of paper, you might want to kind of jot down some of the top 10s. I will supply that maybe as a one-pager to the swag folks, and they can post it on a website or put it out in the mailing or whatever. Why we started. First of all, organic matter is the holy grail of crop agriculture. If you have organic matter, you have the world by the tuckus. If you don't, you're wishing you had it. And every time we till, we oxidize organic matter. So our goal was to reduce the amount of tillage so that we conserve our organic matter. Organic matter is, you get better water holding capability. It is the warehouse for nitrogen in the soil. It is a large contributor to cation exchange capacity. It helps resist compaction. It's better aggregate stability. It is the mother lode, the holy grail. You want it. You want to preserve it if you have it. And we have done one damn fine job of oxidizing a pile of it since our forefathers took the trees off this land. We are in a three-year rotation on our operation. We got into no-tilling beans and wheat, but we struggled with corn, especially following wheat. And so, as Pete said, we parked the plow in 92, we migrated to a chisel plow, then we went to the disc, and the disc with spring secondary tillage actually wasn't too bad. But still, you take 100 bushel of wheat stubble and straw and chaff and everything else, and you mix it into that top 3 inches, and the next spring you try to plant corn into that, and all that little bits of stuff. I mean, it's just a perfect place for every pest there is known to man, plus trying to get good seed to soil contact with all that bits of chaff and stubble and everything in that top 3 inches is real problematic. So we recognize the need to leave the stubble on top, slice it, part it, maybe do a little bit of a fluff, and leave that zone basically for corn planting. And I want to recognize Greg Stewart was one of the guys that kind of pushed me into that. He arranged for a demo. We had a tool. We kind of marched around Middlesex County. And basically most of the guys that did that thing about 10 or 11 years ago have actually adopted. It took some of them longer, but over time a lot of us have adopted the practice. Why we still do it? Overall, our yields are comparable in the long term. This year with that frost on the 23rd of May up in our part of the world, I took a lot of damage in my strip till stuff, and so I'm probably going to not be in the top echelon in the neighborhood. However, 2 years ago in 2012, we had a horrendously dry patch up in our part of the world, and I was 30 and 40 bushel ahead of a lot of neighbors, just because of the water holding capability and the cooler soil and everything else. So. Over the long haul, and we do a fair bit of custom combining across various soil types and tillage, I am very comfortable with my yields. As well, why we still do it, soil quality improving over the long term. Our cost of production is dropping, especially if you pedal the iron, so the plow, the ripper, and the disc, and the cultivator, and all that sort of stuff. And quite frankly, it makes the commitment to the system a lot better. It's like, if you have all that stuff still tucked away in the shed, it's like trying to quit smoking with a carton of cigarettes in the dash of the pickup. It's always going to be the crutch you go to when the cucka hits the fan. You're just going to reach for that. You're going to reach for that tillage device and do it. If you don't have it, or you got to go beg and borrow it off the neighbor or go rent one, you'll think twice about actually doing it. As well, soil disturbance, I believe none is best, and the soil surface is a very powerful tool in terms of fungal and bacterial stuff if we leave it alone, if we leave it undisturbed. And so if I had to pick between a vertical tillage pass, which is going to disturb the whole width of the soil and only a couple inches deep, versus a strip till pass where you only disturb a little bit of it and leave everything else undisturbed, I will pick the strip till pass hands down every day, twice on Sunday. Benefits realized. After you get through what I refer to as the valley of the shadow of death, which is if you park tillage instruments about year 3, you will bottom out. There's a transition between what I refer to as a bacterially driven soil ecology and more to a fungal, and it takes about 3 years to sort of get its feet under it. Once you're past that, I think you're really you're into something that's you will realize is a better deal. And but it is tough making it through. Usually about year 3, everybody's saying, screw this, I'm dragging out the iron, and that's just about the worst time to do it, because you're just really making the turn. It's like about day 5 after you quit smokes. I know that. Stable yields. We just find stable yields. Yeah, we may not top it every year, but we're certainly not going to be on the bottom. Residue decomposition, which is usually the reason we till. A lot of guys, oh, got to do something with this residue. You know, got to go work it in or stir it in or do something. After the machinery on the surface gets going, we now, 200 bushel corn, no-till soys into it, 55, 60 bushel beans, no-till wheat into it, 100 bushel wheat, strip till that, plant corn. By the following summer, about knee-high corn, just as after it closes canopy, you walk in there and I challenge you to find jack diddly residue. I mean, it's just disappearing. So once you have got that machinery going, you need to leave the soil surface undisturbed. So I firmly believe one pass of the vertical tillage tool or one plow and 99% of that benefit is gone. You have effectively reset the clock, you're back to step 1. So it's something you kind of got to commit to and stick with, even though it's maybe not the best thing or you feel it's the best thing at the time. As well, for us, now that we've been doing this for several years, our soil has better carrying capacity. We can run in kind of marginal conditions, and it just has it's just like a sponge. It holds us up. We don't tend to sink into it. As well, we do fall strips primarily into wheat stubble, and so it really moves a lot of our spring workload into that August, September time period when we have time to do it. And as well, we find in the spring, because essentially we have strips ready to go, that we have a faster start in the spring. And in my part of the world, when the earliest guys get out and start scratching dirt, I'm going to the field with a corn planter. And so it does not, I don't feel it's delayed us. It's not, we're very happy with the system. So here's my top 10 points. And the first one is, and I want to clarify that most of my experience is with fall strips into wheat stubble on probably a silt loam and heavier. I don't have a lot of experience on something that starts with a sand or has sand in the name. First of all, a strip till system, if you're into that 3-year rotation strip till, that is the only tillage you're going to have in your entire system. So now your combine and your buggy are your seedbed preparation tools. So most people are really anal after, the cultivator's made the last pass before the planter gets there. You don't want people out driving around the field and doing stupid things, Well, then your combine and your buggy is now your cultivator. And so you want to leave the field in the fall or whenever ready to plant. So mentally, it's a big switch. You can't go out and rut it and think, what the heck, we'll go out and we'll work down those ruts. No. Combine and buggy are now your seedbed preparation tools. So it's a mental switch. No wagons and trucks in the field. That's our goal. That's our rule. And actually, over time, the soil will bear up better over time. And you still got to be smart. but we just find that it carries so much better. Actually, both our combine and our buggy are on tracks, and that's been a big help. Item 2. A lot of people have asked me about narrow row corn. You know, I'm in 20-inch rows, 22-inch rows, you know, and I want a strip till. And I go, there's probably some tools on the market that are it's possible to do it with. I would say it probably can be done. I would not encourage it, mainly, and the main reason, because you don't have a lot of real estate to move residue. So if you're going to part that residue and move it aside, if you've got a 10-inch strip and you're trying to, you know, move 10 inches of residue onto 20 inches of real estate, that's barely enough room. I've had issues trying to do that. To try to take 10 and push it onto 10, it's maybe in soybean stubble, but certainly not wheat. So you really got to reconsider narrow rows if you're thinking about doing this. Third, residue management. So the combine, that's my big, if you cannot spread as wide as your head, you need a smaller head. And I don't care if your combine can push a 40-foot flex draper. If you can't spread 40 feet, then you need to rethink that. Secondly, if you are dropping straw, you must spread chaff. I do not like these machines that put it all out in one stream and cannot separate chaff from straw. You just do not want to go there. If you want to have success in this, you got to be able to spread the chaff if you're going to drop the straw. So pick your machine or trade your machine or get somebody in who's doing it. That should be one of your criteria. Fourth point, stubble height. Cut low, chop fine, spread wide. Or go out and mow it or clip it. It's kind of like what we have here. This will make it's not impossible to make a nice strip in tall stubble, but you'll make a better strip in short, clipped down stuff. First of all, you don't have the problem with the rows falling in and all that sort of stuff. But the other thing too is we've got 3 months of decomposition here. You know, August, September, October at least. Get this stuff down on the ground. Worms do not climb trees, and the bacteria and the fungi and the worms and everything will take care of one pile of residue if you get it down on the ground where they can handle it. If you're going to leave it standing, it's going to be there in the spring. And this is contrary to a lot of guys talk about corn. It's so late in the fall that probably the best thing we can do is leave as much of our corn stalk standing as we can and keep it off the soil surface for the following year. Wheat's the other way around, but I think the main reason is because we have all that time to decompose it in the late summer and fall. Item 5, fall strips or spring strips. Well, the first thing is a strip till device is a dry land tool. So whenever you have dry land is the best time to strip. If that is not going to be spring for you, then fall is better. However, I know a lot of guys that spring strip. A lot of those guys have sand in their nomenclature, and that's fine. We do some spring stripping for edible beans, but by and large, most of ours is in the fall. As well, our workload, a fall strip or a late summer strip, August, September, the workload's great. You can call the fertilizer dealer and they actually send a tender truck out and you send them home with a pickup truck and you got all day to work away on 20 or 30 ton of fertilizer. You try pulling that in the spring and you know, they don't want to have any part of that. And as well, now having said that, if you do it in the spring, there are more options about nitrogen and sulfur that you can put in that zone, and that's nice. But again, it's the logistics that may bite you in the tuchus on that one. Item 6, the tool. Is it a Shank or is it a Coulter? So the Shank, I call the Shank machines essentially anything that use like a knife. So, you know, Yetter, Orthman, Kraus, Strip Cat, essentially I call them a Shank machine. A Coulter machine would be a Soil Warrior or a Dawn. I have used both, and I have migrated myself from a Shank to a Coulter style machine. Essentially, a Shank will normally build you a taller mound and maybe a bit narrower. The Coulter machines will be somewhat flatter and wider. In my soil type, silt loams and maybe a smidge heavier, fall only, I would not run a Shank in my soils in the spring. So the reason I kind of went to a Coulter is a little more versatility. So But I know a lot of guys that have, like I said, sand in their nomenclature, and usually they have neighbors that are potato farmers, that's Andy, that run a Shank in the spring and love it. So it's, again, it's soil type dependent. A Coulter is a little bit more universal for fall and spring applications. However, a Coulter machine, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, is more expensive up front and more expensive to run in the long, like operating costs. But for me, there is more versatility in it. Item 7, topography. This farm would probably not be a problem. I'm on complex topography, complex slopes, so anytime you have water that kind of comes into a bit of a valley and then runs somewhere, in other words, you know, after a heavy rain event, you'll see water maybe moving down that thing. It's not maybe bad enough for a permanent grass strip, but as I cross those places, I always lift my tool out, leave my fertilizer running, and set back in. If you disturb that, like a lot of guys think, oh, you got all those little berms and that'll stop the water. It does until the first bit of water gets through it, and then it's like a venturi. That water starts running across it, and it will actually suck the dirt right out of it. You'll end up with valleys. So pick up the tool. Any places you have those complex topographies, be a little bit careful about stripping. Nice big long flat slopes, I can strip up and down them, especially after years of no-till where the water infiltrates a lot better. But anytime water comes together and congregates and then moves en masse, bad things happen to good people. So yes, item 8, fertilizer. Contentious issue maybe in this crowd with the folks that are sponsoring, but I'm going to give it my take on it. So I do a bunch of custom stripping. I have livestock guys that basically just want the strips, and that's fine. I have guys that still have a planter with boxes on it, and they want to still put their map on 2x2, that's fine, and I just put potash on for them. In my case, I'm running most of my P&K for 3 years through my machine, and that's the way we do things. The question is how much, and I want to talk for a second. Jeff Reintz, who was at the Innovative Farmers last year, it was reported that he has reduced his fertilizer by 75% because he uses a strip till situation. I would like to correct that and make sure everybody understands that Jeff is actually applying 75% of the recommended Iowa broadcast rate. So he's got it down a little bit below the recommendation. I don't know what Iowa's soil test calibration, if it's calibrated on a bit of a build, then essentially he's putting his P&K down at 75% of the broadcast rate and still not finding his levels dropping after 20 years. That's his experience. Just want to make sure everybody's correct on that. Anytime though we index fertilizer into a zone, we always get better response for any given amount. So, AKA more bang for the buck. In our particular case, we are essentially calculating what our removal is, and all of our P&K goes back on either through an air seeder or a strip tiller, and we do broadcast a wee little bit of K. And then in our case, we come back with our planter. All we carry on our planter is 28%, and we put down 10 to 20 gallon of 28 behind the closing wheels. Greg Stewart came out a few years ago with a little plot planter. So 3 years of research, 7 treatments, and 2 replications. He messed around with dry bands, liquid in furrow, combinations of the two, and a whole bunch of stuff on my strips. And essentially, he could always find a few bushels, but he could never find enough to pay for what he put down. So that's kind of how I have stuck with essentially, if all my P&K's in that band in the fall, all I need is a little bit of N to get things rolling in the spring. Possibly some sulfur nowadays. The other thing I want to talk about is, yes, if you are running a Shank machine and applying fertilizer with it, a lot of the Shank machines come out and they have a pipe that basically goes down and puts the fertilizer at the base of the Shank. Cut that off. If we deep place P&K in Ontario, I think we hide it from the plant. Nebraska, where they want, for the roots, get down there deep in the summertime when it gets dry. That's fine. We're not Nebraska. If we put it that deep, we'll hide it. So what we did with our Shank machine actually was we cut our tubes off just above the soil surface, put a little splash plate on, kind of like a manure splash plate on an applicator, and it spread it out basically in that band. The berming Coulters contained it, basically folded it in. We had a nice pancake, kind of like the old T-band that we used to put counter down with. So it's, you know, a T-band, they're nice. The width of the strip, the top couple of inches, maybe a little bit went down the shank, but essentially keep it shallow, where it will actually act as a starter for you the following spring. But it's still mixed in with soil, bound. The Coulter machines, basically they mix it in, so, and they mix it in, generally speaking, through the whole zone. Item 9, guidance. In our particular case, we run RTK on our stripper, basically because it's virtually impossible to see a marker mark with all that residue. So that's kind of what we run. We do not have it on our planter. So if you have somebody come in and do some work for you, especially maybe this machine here, don't feel that you have to have guidance in your tractor to follow it. You can hand steer it. We've done it for 10 years. It's not the end of the world. You can see it from there, but it's very doable. And actually, the planter we find tends to kind of follow the strip a little bit anyhow. So be happy. And our planter is basically just equipped with a set of row cleaners to kind of brush stuff aside that may have fallen in on the strip. Yeah, so don't get caught up in the fact that you maybe have to have guidance in order to plant behind one of these things. Item 10, last thing, planning. So once your strips are made, I want no traffic on that field. So there is no manure spreaders, there's no drag boom irrigators, there is no Terrigator with a little bit of broadcast fertilizer or whatever, or lime or anything else. Get that all done before you strip, because once those strips are made, they're very vulnerable to being packed. So the last thing you do is strip. I'm also not a big fan of self-propelled sprayers because they like to run about 16 miles an hour. If they ever get off the firm ground in between the row and into the ground, the guy will have 5 degrees cut on the wheels trying to get her popped back out, and it'll take him about 7,000 feet to do it. So just a very careful operator, or a lighter sprayer, or a pull type or something if you're going to do a spray application, which we do late in the fall to take care of some volunteer stuff. When I strip, the first thing I do is I survey around the entire field, store all my lines, and basically have everything all stored in my display, and then I start in the middle and essentially work out. So I'll get the whole field stripped, and then I'll do 2 passes around the outside last, with the outside pass last. So it takes a bit of planning. It's not as fast as pulling in on one side and going to the other, or doing 2 passes around the outside and then stripping everything else. It takes a little bit more time, but it leaves everything completely undriven on when I leave the field. So those are my top 10. And I will hand it back to Peter, and thank you very much for your time.
No, very cool, Ken. I like the practical applied stuff, absolutely. Questions for Ken? Yes?
You talked about in 3 years the soil changes from a bacteria to a fungal soil. How's that work?
You better repeat the question, please, Ken.
Okay, so the question is, I observed that, or I postulated that soil changes from bacterially driven to a fungally driven. So I don't have any science behind this, and I'm a scientist. I like repeatability, and it's just my observation. For the first couple of years, you know, you leave wheat stubble on the surface, and it'll still be there in the spring. But over time, you leave that soil to surface undisturbed, and there is populations of stuff that will develop on that soil surface which start to degrade things way faster. So one of the explanations I heard at a conference was that you go from a bacterially dominant, so all those bacteria that wait for tillage and love tillage, to a more fungally driven, and fungi can't tolerate tillage, and so you just get it's more of like a forest floor or a meadow type of population of stuff on the soil surface, when we leave it undisturbed.
If you think about it, fungi, by their very nature, grow hyphae, right? That's how they spread, and that's how they exist, is by growing these little filaments through the soil. As soon as you do tillage, you break up those filaments, and therefore you set the fungi way back, and you you promote the bacteria because they're single-celled guys, they like the oxygen. So there's lots of soil scientists who've seen that. If you do tillage, there will be more bacteria in the soil than fungi. If you do less tillage, then you promote the fungi, particularly the mycorrhiza, which are very positive fungi. And if you can leave their hyphae in the soil, then they will predominate in that process. So that's where Ken's coming from on that comment. Jan, you had a question?
Yeah, the nitrogen. How do you put the nitrogen?
Jan's asking how we deal with nitrogen. So 30 to 60 pounds down with the planter. The balance we side dress with ammonia. We side dress, yes. Yeah, skip row, 60-inch, usually around 115 pounds of side dress. We grow corn on about 0.7 pounds of N per bushel. So 200 bushel corn on 140 pounds of applied N.
Okay, yep.
Can you do your strip tilling into wheat stubble? Have you had any experience with underseeded clover?
So the question is, I do strips into wheat stubble. Do I have any experience with underseeded clover? And the answer is yes. We personally don't have a lot of clover. We have a very difficult time seeming to get established. Yeah, I know. But Peter's been to my place to see the clover plot that we had for Middlesex Soil and Crop, and there was not a plant. So, yes, I've done it on clover. In general, earlier is better when the clover's small. And George Cornelison at Watford is probably the has more experience with this, but what he does is he basically, as quick as he can, he gets out and he gets his strips in like in early August, and then that clover actually will like grow. It'll almost cover the strip, but when it dies, when he kills it down in the fall and by spring, I mean, he's got this nice black strip and this nice inter-row area. So it is possible to strip with clover. I've also done clover in like November. That was just killed like about 3 days before I got there, and it's a rugged go. First of all, it was wet, soil was wet, but I mean, all that mass is just difficult to cut apart and move out of the way. So earlier is better if you got clover.
Yeah, and the clover really will cover in. It really is quite amazing. You kill the clover in the strip, and the clover between the strips will grow, and it will cover the strips. So when you drive past it on the 20th of September, you expect there's a full clover stand there. Just like your soybeans will canopy in 15-inch rows, the clover will do the same thing. But, okay, we're going to have to cut it off there in the interest of time. Sorry. Yeah, I have two more questions, but we're... All right, real quick. Phil, you were up first, and then we'll take...
Any plans to introduce cover crops in your system?
Any plans to introduce cover crops in our system? Yes, we actually we're dealing mostly with oats right now. So we get the air seeder out and oats right after the wheat's off. We're messing around with other stuff as we get comfort and everything. Last year actually, so one experience, place I live on, wheat off, 5,000 gallons of dairy manure, irrigated on, and oats, just a bushel of oats. And by Labor Day, I mean, they are this high, in flag, not quite headed, and I am nervous. And come this spring, you can't even see the rows. I mean, all you can see these little divots where the strip was in a canopy that's probably this high. And you walk out there now and you wonder if I had anything, because the oat residue's gone, the wheat residue's gone.
But you terminated the oats when they were this high?
No, the frost did.
No, you let them get this big?
I couldn't, like, October was gnarly, and we finally got a frost, and they slowed down. They never went to head.
Go slow with that, right?
Yeah,
That can be a bit of an issue. So, yep.
I've gone back to one tillage pass in the spring planting corn because of Canada flea beans.
Canada flea bean. It is, you got to manage it in all three crops, is really what it boils down to. But quite frankly, if you don't want to drag the stuff around and all that sort of stuff, leaving it on the soil surface helps too.
Okay, we're going to...